Back with you on the late edition. Remind you again, we are, of course, dealing with the testimony of KZN Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, currently appearing before Parliament's ad hoc committee probing allegations of political interference in police. We're joined now by Unisa politics professor, Professor Dirk Kotzé. Prof, good to have you. Good evening, and thank you very much for your time. Unnecessary delays, let's start there. Administrative confusion, things that otherwise could have been preventable. What does that say about accountability too, but what does that say about the credibility of Parliament in its processes?
Yes, good evening, Tabu. I think it has been a bit of a problematic start this morning. The fact that the evidence that General Mkhwanazi was presenting was titled that it is additional information that is to a large extent, or they call it supplementary affidavit, mainly based on what he presented already to the Nhlanhla Commission. So the fact that there was objections to that, which is more of a, I would say, not technical in nature, it was more about, who's the primary leading committee or commission, either Parliament or the Nhlanhla Commission. So it's about pride and about who's in the strong leading position. But at the same time, I think it was a bit of a reflection on the way in which Parliament approached this committee. They started late. They were supposed to have started much earlier on already. There were lots of delays about their terms of reference that they only much later on concluded. So, but I think the big difference between them and that of the Commission is that the Commission has a terms of reference. They have a budget. Parliament and this committee, which is an ad hoc committee, it's not one of the existing portfolio committees or select committees, had to establish itself and also to determine what the procedures will be. At the same time, it's about politics. It's about party politics. And therefore, the different parties position themselves with respect to this in different ways, which obviously in the case of the Commission, that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, going to Mkhwanazi's party, the buck stops with Parliament. So it's raising the argument whether beginning at the Nhlanhla Commission or at least supplementing a statement from the Nhlanhla Commission does not interpret as the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog. Must I put it that way?
Yes, that is how I interpret what was the objection coming, for example, from Julius Malema specifically, that he said that they can't be the junior partner in this situation. They should be actually the main partner in this process and not the Commission. So that's why I say it was more about posturing, about who is taking the lead, who should receive the main credit for what is happening. But once they've settled that, late in the morning, then everything started. And I think what we've seen now with General Mkhwanazi is that it's not merely a repetition of what his presentation or evidence was at the Nhlanhla Commission. What we've seen this just before the break was indeed going into quite detail about the relationships and the dynamics between the Minister, the National Commissioner of Police, General Masemola himself, to a large extent, as well as other components, like even IDAC, which he very much criticized quite severely as a divided and implicated party almost in this situation.
So some of what has come through in terms of the quality of it, the argument in the debate of whether the political killings task team would have been a political initiative or an executive initiative. Is that a technical argument or is it much of the muchness? I mean, it came from the presidency. He's a politician. Is it a political process that would have given birth to that?
Well, in the end, I think it goes back to the relationship between the Minister and the National Commissioner, which we also see at the Nhlanhla Commission becoming quite an issue about what is the separation of powers and the different roles that each one of them can play. Yes, the President is the overarching authority, whether it is the executive or the public administration part of it. So, for example, SIU investigations also come from the president in the form of a proclamation, and then it goes into the judicial process, or first investigative and judicial processes. So this was, in a sense, I would say, something similar. But I think where it really becomes relevant is once it leaves the office of the president, who then is the driving force, and who can also determine whether it should continue or not. And that became then a very important question. And the accusation that the minister, because of influences that we will hear about, I think, in coming weeks, took the decision on his own to dissolve the task team. And I think the evidence of General Mkhwanazi is very much at the Nhlanhla Commission, as well as now again, that it was against the wishes of the top structure of the police, specifically in the end, General Nhlanhla and his own position. And I think this is where the real issue becomes now, because the real question then will be is what was the motive for the minister to dissolve it? And I think that is where that will be the deep question of who influences him, who had some impact and control over him in order to go against, to a large extent, the wishes of the top structures of the police service.
The position of Chief of Staff, Prof, what's your understanding? Is this a political position? The Chief of Staff apparently who had no clue what Chief of Staff is supposed to be. The General quite vocal about him now becoming more political in nature, more than being Chief of Staff.
Well, the Chief of Staff, all ministers have a Chief of Staff. In the ministry, there is a Chief of Staff who's supposed to be the manager of the ministry. So he's the one who determines, he or she is the one who manages the diary of the minister and the deputy ministers, the one who is communicating with the other ministers and with the president's office. So it is really a managerial position. It's not supposed to be a political one. That is the minister and the deputy minister, as well as most ministers have also ministerial advisors in the ministry. That's now over and above the role of the department. And I think for the public, it's important to understand that the ministry and the department are two separate entities, and that they don't overlap, and often they are not even in the same buildings. So I think therefore the Chief of Staff is very important because he or she is very often a gatekeeper, the one who determines who the minister can see, with whom the minister will have contact and have interviews or can phone, and who others who can't do that. So in that sense, it's an influential person, but it's not a person who can take political decisions.
Prof, appreciate your time. Let's leave it.